So now let's go into a little bit of the architecture and the way that these apps work. So Microsoft Teams client is really a facade, kind of a brilliant facade, if you will, over not just Teams services, but all of the Microsoft 365 services. And it stitches them together dynamically for users so that they can just get their work done and not worry about getting the files out of SharePoint and OneDrive, getting the notes in OneNote, getting the plans from Planner, doing their chats somewhere else, etc. So your app actually runs alongside of all this. And we had a question from the audience that's appropriate here, which is about embedded apps. Does Microsoft Teams support embedded apps? And I think the answer to that is sort of depends on what you mean by embedded apps, because if what you mean is you can go onto a tool like YouTube and click the embed button and copy a little iframe markup over and drop it into Teams, the answer is no, because of security and other reasons. You can't just put anything into the Teams window. But actually, all of Teams applications are embedded in the sense that they're not actually running in Teams. It's just that instead of an embed code in an iframe, you need to create this thing called a Teams app manifest. And what that does is it tells Teams, hey, there's a tab over there, and it could be hosted anywhere on the internet. And here's the URL. There's a bot over there that maybe is going to implement a messaging extension or be conversational in nature. And that bot has this identifier. So all that information is in the manifest, and we'll show you that in just a minute. And then you can implement those services anywhere on the internet. So here are the various capabilities once again. And most of these end up in the manifest. Dialogues, which Rabia will show in a bit, are an API call. Adaptive cards are a JSON format. But everything else is kind of declared in the manifest and then uploaded as the Teams app package that you would see in the Teams App Store or elsewhere. Now, there's a number of different ways to create these applications. Power Platform is really popular for use inside of enterprises. Unfortunately, it doesn't really extend to more than one tenant. So if you want to sell your software, you would have to manually install it in everybody's tenant. There's a number of kind of traditional approaches where you're writing code, including Teams Toolkit, which is Microsoft's latest and greatest code generator that will scaffold out a project for you. Yo Teams is similar and more mature. It's from the community and has been around for a while, and there's a lot of samples out there for that, as well as Teams Toolkit. You can use SharePoint Framework. But in talking to independent software vendors and customers alike, we found that in a lot of cases, there are already existing applications in place, and people don't want to really, start over again with one of these code generators. So to address that, we've created Microsoft Teams App Camp. And here's the website. You can go to this at aka.ms/app-camp. It's here. It's live for you right now. And what this does is it includes a bunch of content, including video briefings. There's a full business briefing with a lot more detail from our business experts and some case studies. And then there are two technical briefings, one that's all about building Teams apps and one that's all about monetizing the Teams apps in our commercial marketplace. And then there's, for every lab, so the whole thing is hands-on. For every lab, there is a video showing the details in case you get stuck or want more detail. And then we have a link to our sister site, Mastering the Marketplace, which goes much deeper on the commercial marketplace aspects. And then finally, there are a ton of labs. And that's really what we're going to go through now, is taking a look at these various labs. So basically, you're given at the beginning of App Camp, you're given a starting app, and you can choose one of two different starting apps, one of which already uses Azure Active Directory. So remember, I mentioned Azure AD is sort of the underlying identity service that makes Teams work, and your app will work a lot more smoothly for users if you also use Azure Active Directory and Single Sign-On. So if you're already using Azure AD in your app, you could start with the the starting app that uses Azure AD. If not, we have one that doesn't use Azure AD. There's an extra step there to do something that we call account linking to kind of create a linkage between the two systems so that users can still enjoy Azure AD Single Sign-On. And then that brings you to what we call the core Teams application, which is just a personal tab. And then from there, you can extend using kind of in a choose your own adventure style to show configurable tabs, meeting apps, messaging extensions, and all these other options, and not the least of which is monetizing your application. The prerequisites for this are extremely light. Basically, you can get a free Microsoft 365 tenant. I encourage you not to use the one that you're using in production to do this, but you can get a free tenant, and there's instructions in the App Camp website on how to do that, where you'll be the admin and you'll have 25 users, test users that you can configure and use. Node.js is used as sort of the server side that's going to run on your local computer, and you'll need some kind of a code editor. And then in order for the bot framework to get in, and just for kind of convenience of everything to get in with SSL and all those things, we're using a tool called ngrok, which is a tunneling program that allows you to access that local website from the internet, but just on that one port while you're testing. So you'll have control over that, and it does make life a lot easier. So that's the setup. Now let's take a look at some of the actual labs. I'm going to start with the Azure AD starting application. And here it is. I, of course, have to log in then with Azure Active Directory. And what you'll see is I can log in, I can view my orders. All this data is coming from the venerable Northwind database. You can see how old these orders are. This database has been around since the early days of Microsoft Access, I believe. But it's actually a free download to get all this data, and that's also in the instructions. So that's why we used it. It was quick and easy, and it gives you some decent amount of business data to work with. So obviously the system knows who I am because it's showing me my orders. I can also view products, and I can come in and look at the different product categories. Everything's cross-linked, so I can look at a product, see the orders for that product, etc. So that's the starting application. It's really kind of simple. And now if I come in and create one of these manifest.json files, so there is a tool called the Teams Developer Portal that will make it easier to do this with just kind of filling in a form. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to show you just really how it works at its core, which is it's just a JSON file. And there's a bunch of data here about metadata about the app itself. And then if I scroll down a little bit, you'll see that I'm declaring two personal tabs, which are called static tabs in the manifest. One for orders and one for products that correspond to the two tabs that were in the original application. And we're also at some point going to strip out the original navigation so that people can navigate through Teams. So if we come in here and look at this inside of Teams, and of course the instructions will show you how to do that. Oh, yeah, we get this error. And this is one of the other things about embedding things, right? So you have to kind of, most login and authentication systems will not work in an iframe. And Azure AD is no exception. So the next thing we have to do is update the code. And in the next lab, you'll update the code to actually show, to do a single sign-on. So that if I do a refresh, bang, I'm logged in immediately with no hassles, and I can just start using the application. Now, in order to make that work, we had to make a little code change, and it's really pretty simple. We're just going to go in and there's a JavaScript SDK that runs in the browser side of Teams. So there's a client and a server in this application. Inside that client, we're just going to initialize the Teams SDK and then get an auth token. And then just that's it. We don't have to go through all of the code that we had before to authenticate the user. And that gets us a token from which we can call our own backend, which is what a typical application will want to do unless they're trying to call a third-party API directly from the browser. So, so that's kind of the starting point.
Cool. So it's the core application, right? From there, folks can actually go ahead and extend it using other of those adventures that you mentioned before.
Exactly. So you can do those, choose your own adventure in any order you want. I'll start by showing the configurable tab. So you saw a configurable tab before, but I didn't actually configure it. So let me show you how that would work. Imagine that I'm here in the beverages channel. And now if somebody asks me to check the stock level on one of the products, and my app is already in Teams, so all I have to do is click on the app that we just installed, go into products, find beverages, and that really didn't save me a lot of time, did it? I mean, I still had to navigate all over the place to answer that question. And remember, this is the beverages channel. That's all we do is beverages inside of here. So we will have you add a configurable tab where you can add this application directly to the Teams channel. This works in a group chat as well. And kind of pre-navigate for the user, right? So that you're bringing them right to the information that's relevant to that group. And then when I save this, it's going to put a note in the channel, drawing people into the tab, and there's the tab. So it brings me right to the information that I need inside of this channel. So to take a look at the code, it's fairly simple. What we're doing is when somebody selects a category, this is a separate page that we had to create, which is a configuration page. When somebody selected one of the product categories, we went ahead and set the validity state to true using the JavaScript SDK. What that did was it lit up the save button. They couldn't save it until they chose a category, right? And then once that save happens, well, we registered an on-save handler that will handle that. And what that's going to do is save inside of the Teams infrastructure some information, including an entity ID, which is where I'm storing the category to be shown in this tab. You could also encode data into the content URL, or maybe even just put a record locator for a database somewhere in the entity ID. Any way you want to do it so that you can get back the information that has been configured for use inside of that tab. So that's a configurable tab. Rabia, I believe you have a messaging extension to show.
Yes, I do. And in fact, since you were already talking about updating the stock levels, let's find out how you can do that using a message extension. So this is the message extension adventure that you will be doing in the lab. So I'm in a channel called stock updates, again, updating the stock for a product. Usually what I would do is I need to go to an application, find the product, update the details, etc. But right here, I'm in conversation with my teammates and I want this done quickly. So how do I save time? I have the message app already installed. So from the compose area, I can pull up the app and search for the product right here in Teams while I'm having the chat with my colleagues. And select the product, the chai that you selected as well. And you can see a nice adaptive card with a form in it. So it's like a form. It's not just display of information. Anybody can go in and update the stock. So maybe we are chatting about the levels, checking with the vendor, etc. But you can get everything done and updated right here in the same context. So I'm going to go ahead and update the stock, and you'll see that the form refreshes itself and brings back the card that shows the latest and the greatest. So that's the message extension, and you will be building this out. Let me show you a sneak peek into the code. So as you can see here, I'm in the bot.js file, and upon every activity, there is something happening inside. So you can see here, based on the activity, whether it's a query. So query means you're searching for a product, then it will be handled by a handler here. If you are going to select the item like I did, then it is going to handle that as well, so that it will put that adaptive card in. And in the adaptive card, once you click on the submit button, it will update the product information. Now, if you come down below, you can see that every interaction, every activity here in this lab would bring back as a response an adaptive card. So that's what you're seeing, the card getting updated, etc. Cool. So the next one, the next lab is deep link. So deep linking is an important concept because navigation, if not done well, throws people off. And when you're deep linking, you need to bring people back into the Teams application that they were in. Now, imagine you're talking about an order here. So you can see the interaction isn't as fruitful. Let me change that now. I'm going back to my orders personal tab, and I want my colleagues to work on a particular order. I will go to that order from within this table. So let me go back and select one of the order information, which will then take me to the order details page. And you'll notice a button, copy order URL. So this on selection would give me a link that you will be building using the labs, which will directly take my colleagues or anyone into this order within Teams. So I can come back to this conversation, and to make it more useful, I'll mention my colleague and say, here is the order. Now it's very hard for Adil here to ignore this task because she can directly access this information from this chat. As you can see here, this link is unique, and you can actually build that out. Now, once I'm logged in as Adil, let me just switch now, and Adil can see this message, and without even thinking, without doing 100 different steps, she can go ahead and click on this, and it will take her into the Teams applications page of the order. So that particular order details page, but within Teams. So she's not actually switching back and forth. Now she can go ahead and update the work. So there's it's like you can focus on what you want to do and get things done quickly, saving a lot of time. Now, how we have generated this link is by creating the link this way manually, and then we will share it. But let me just tell you, whatever we've done in this lab is just the tip of the iceberg of what you can do with deep linking. So go to aka.ms/deep-link to find out everything you can do to make use of deep linking. Like, it's not just linking it to a tab. You can do many things. You can link to a configurable tab, or you can link to a group chat. You can link to a meeting scheduling dialogue, or even a installation into an app installation form as well. So there are many different ways you can leverage this. So I would suggest you take a look at that. And the next one is dialogues. I'm pretty sure, Bob, you have mentioned dialogues many times in your demos as well. They're these very good interactive model pop-ups, I would say, within Teams that makes it so much easier for users, individual users, to add input. So I'm again in the order details page, and you'll notice there is a button called Add Notes. Once you select that, it opens up the dialog, and this dialog is actually developed using the Teams JavaScript SDK. There is a API called dialog.open. So if you've got a web page, a HTML page in your application already, you can reuse that page and make it a dialog by just passing some properties. So this is a great way to reuse existing applications or existing forms in your application. You can also use adaptive cards, by the way, for dialogues. So here we are adding notes into a particular order, as many notes as you want. So this is a app you will be building. Now let me quickly show you how it's done. So you can see here the small portion, the taskinfo.url, it points to a HTML file. Like I said, it's just a web page. And towards the end of this block, you can see Microsoft Teams.dialog.open, which is the API, where you pass this information of your web page. And then it also has a callback function called submit handler. What this function does is it brings back the response from that dialog back into the page where you want this information to be, worked on. So this is how it's done for dialogues, and you will be able to do this in the lab as well. Now, I know there is this big piece monetization lab as well for you to show, Bob, so I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks. So, yeah, this is perhaps one of the more interesting labs. I'm going to have to go kind of quickly based on the time. But basically, in this lab, you'll actually add licensing and monetization to your app. So if nobody's licensed the app, they don't get to use it. As part of this, you'll actually get to run a app source simulator. So this simulates the App Store, and that will allow the user to purchase the app, in quotes, fake purchase the app, and bring you to the app's landing page, which is what tells the application, and this is the landing page, tells the application that somebody has purchased some licenses and has actually paid for them. So then Microsoft is charging the customer and sending 97% of the proceeds over to you as the app vendor. So I'm going to go ahead and enable self-service licensing inside of the app's licensing scheme. And now it works. And if you come back, and you'll be walking through all this code and seeing how it works inside of the lab.